Okay, so like imagine you're trying to build this like championship team, right?
Okay.
You're working with a budget that's like tighter than like a drum or something.
Like that?
That's what it feels like for a lot of schools these days. And that's what we're diving into today, like how they're finding those wins. The world of education funding and school improvement. We've got some excerpts from this blog post by Dr. Howie Knoff. He's from Project Achieve. And he makes this really interesting comparison to Moneyball. The baseball one. We're talking about data-driven decisions.
And like find those hidden gems that maybe other people aren't even looking for. So by the time we're done with this deep dive, you'll not only understand how schools are trying to do more with less, but you'll also get a sneak peek into like how data could revolutionize education.
Yeah, and it's really challenging that assumption that throwing more money at a problem is the only solution, right? Sometimes. The key is really understanding how to use the resources you have more effectively.
Yeah, and he jumps right into this whole like grant writing scene.
Yeah.
And it's way more cutthroat than I ever realized.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, schools are spending so much time, countless hours really, chasing these very specific grants. And, you know, Dr. Knopf's argument is it's become more about ticking boxes than actually showing need.
Right. And he gives this example of schools applying for mental health grants. And some were rejected, not because they didn't have kids struggling, but because they didn't present the data in the specific way that the grant wanted, which, I mean, it's got to be so frustrating for everyone involved.
Totally. It highlights this big issue, right? If schools are so focused on jumping through these hoops for funding, are they putting enough thought into maximizing what they already have?
Right. It's almost like catch-22 in a way. So how does Moneyball fit into all of this? Like, I get the movie reference, but what does that actually look like for schools?
Right. So think of Billy Beane, right? The Oakland A's general manager. He built this winning team on a tiny budget by using data to find these undervalued players that everyone else missed. Dr. Knoff suggests schools can do the same thing with their staff.
So we're not talking about like trading teachers like baseball cards or anything.
Right.
But what does this look like practically?
So it could be identifying teachers with very specific talents or expertise, and then putting them in the right places to address needs. For example, maybe there's this teacher who's amazing at working with students with dyslexia, but they're spending most of their time doing something else. Shifting their focus could have this huge impact without having to hire anyone new.
Wait, hold on, because this is ringing a bell. Dr. Knoff tells this story in his blog about a district that had multiple counselors, social workers, the whole support team, and yet they were still struggling to meet the student needs. It makes you wonder if this kind of misallocation of resources is happening everywhere.
Absolutely, and that's really where the need for data-driven decision-making comes in. You know it's about using data to find those hidden gems within the school system, but also the potential areas for improvement. Just like baseball stats, the answers might be right there in front of you.
How do we actually bring Moneyball into the classroom? It can't just be about test scores, right?
No, it's not just about test scores. It's about taking this holistic approach, looking at data on everything, from academic performance to attendance to student behavior. And this is where things get really interesting. Dr. Knoff actually uses the term sabermetrics to describe how this works in education.
Okay, so for those of us who haven't seen the movie 100 times, can you break that down? What is sabermetrics?
Okay, so sabermetrics is basically the use of data and statistical analysis to evaluate and predict player performance. In baseball, we can use the same techniques in education to understand what teaching methods are working, identify students at risk, evaluate different programs. It's about moving beyond just gut feelings and using evidence to make better decisions.
Okay, I'm starting to see how powerful this could be.
Yeah.
I also imagine it could get pretty complicated.
Oh, absolutely. Dr. Knoff actually points out this major challenge. Some districts, they have so much data they don't know what to do with it, and others don't even have the resources to collect the data they need.
So it's almost like this data paradox. Too much or too little can be equally problematic.
Exactly. And this is where he says schools need to step up their game, especially when it comes to needs assessments. But he emphasizes that we need to go deeper than just the usual methods.
How do you do a needs assessment the Moneyball way? Give us the playbook here.
Well, he outlines this really comprehensive approach that starts with what he calls a historical and current status evaluation. This involves looking at data trends over the past 3 or 4 years to see how things have changed.
So not just a snapshot of this year, but looking back to see where things have been and how we got here. I like that. What else?
He also suggests a SWOT analysis. That's strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. It helps a school really understand their internal and external environment and pinpoint areas for improvement.
Okay, so SWOT. But how do you actually do that for a school? Like, what would even be considered a strength or a weakness?
Yeah, that's a great question. Think about it like this. Strengths could be things like high parental involvement, a strong teaching staff, a really robust curriculum. Weaknesses might include outdated facilities, high student-to-teacher ratios, lack of access to technology. Opportunities could be things like partnerships with local businesses, grants that are available, and threats might include things like budget cuts, changing demographics in the community, competition from charter schools.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
By breaking it down like that, it suddenly feels way less intimidating. So what are the next steps?
So, Dr. Knoff also emphasizes the importance of auditing existing resources, both within the school and in the community. This helps schools identify any gaps or areas where they might be lacking.
Right, it's like taking stock of your inventory before you go shopping. You don't want to buy something you already have.
Exactly. And finally, he stresses the importance of something called a gap analysis, with a clear action plan.
Okay, so we've identified the gaps. Now what? What's a gap analysis?
So it's about connecting the dots between those needs we identified and the resources that are available, creating a roadmap to bridge those gaps and achieve the school's goals. This is where the real Moneyball strategy comes in. You're making data-driven decisions about how to allocate resources and create the interventions that will have the most impact.
This is starting to feel less like Moneyball and more like Moneyball Education Edition.
Right. And here's the thing. This whole process isn't just about improving outcomes for students, although obviously that's the main goal. Dr. Knoff suggests that schools could actually save money in the long run by using this approach.
Really? How so?
Well, think about it. If you can identify and address inefficiencies, you can potentially reduce costs associated with things like staff turnover or ineffective programs. You're essentially investing in strategies that have a proven track record of success, which could lead to more bang for your buck.
Plus, I'd imagine happier teachers and staff make for a more successful school.
Yeah, word of mouth is everything. That can lead to more community support, which means more local funding, right? Absolutely. It's about creating this virtuous cycle where success breeds success, and data plays this crucial role in driving that cycle forward.
All right, I've covered a lot of ground here. Before we jump into the next part, I want to remind you that we'll have links to Dr. Knoff's full blog post in our show notes so you can dive deeper into this yourself, but let's keep unpacking this. There's still so much more to explore.
Yeah, I'm particularly intrigued by the potential for this approach to really address the mental health crisis in schools. That's something Dr. Knoff touches on. That I think we need to dig into further.
Let's do it. We're going to get into that right after this.
You know, Dr. Knoff makes this really interesting point about how this mental health grant example, it's like a microcosm of a bigger issue in education. We always want more resources, but we don't always think about how to use what we already have.
Yeah.
You know, in the best way possible.
Yeah. It's like we're always chasing the next grant or the newest program or whatever, and we kind of forget to look inward and say, like, okay, how can we do better with what we already have? I guess that's where the Moneyball mentality comes in.
Exactly. It's about applying that same data-driven approach to every part of education, not just funding. Like, think about literacy instruction. There's tons of research on what works, but are we using that data to actually inform how we teach?
That's a really good point.
Yeah.
Because sometimes it feels like in education, we get stuck in our routines, like we've always done it this way. But if you're not constantly evaluating and changing, are we really doing the best we can for students? Like, think about, like, teacher professional development, too. Like, how can we use data to make sure that teachers are getting the support they need?
That's another great example. We could use data to figure out where teachers need more training, more support, and then, like, really tailor those professional development opportunities to meet those specific needs. It's about being proactive and strategic, not reactive.
Right. And what about, like, student support services? Things like tutoring, counseling, after-school programs. Could this approach help schools make sure those resources are going to the students who need them most?
Totally. We could use data to track student progress, see who's struggling, and then get them connected with the right support. It's about creating that safety net that catches students before they fall through the cracks.
You know, Dr. Knoff also talks about how the challenges and opportunities with data can be different depending on how big the school district is. He says that large districts often have the opposite problem of smaller rural districts.
That's true. Large districts often have so much data, but they might not have the people or the systems to analyze it effectively. They're drowning in information, but they're thirsty for insights.
So it's not just about having data. It's about knowing what to do with it.
Yeah.
What about smaller districts? They probably have the opposite problem, right?
Exactly. Smaller districts might not have as much data, and they might not have the money to invest in fancy data tools or hire people just to analyze data.
So it sounds like there's this data dilemma, no matter what size the district is.
Yeah, and that's why we need tailored solutions and support systems. You can't just have a one-size-fits-all approach. We need to think about the specific challenges and opportunities of different types of schools and districts.
Yeah, we've got all this data floating around, but Dr. Knoff says if schools keep doing the same old analyses, they're going to keep getting the same old results. And we know those haven't been great in a lot of cases. He's basically calling for like a complete change in how we think about and use data in education.
He says, we need to move beyond just collecting data and start using it to make decisions and actually make things better. It's about shifting our mindset from data as this burden to data as a tool for change.
And he thinks that doing a really thorough needs assessment, done the right way with this Moneyball mindset, could actually save schools money.
It's not some magic solution. By identifying things that aren't working and putting resources towards things that are proven to work, schools can save money and create a better system.
Right, it's like that old saying, a stitch in time saves 9. If you address problems early, you can avoid bigger problems later. And not just financial problems. We're talking about creating a better environment for students.
Yeah.
And helping them reach their full potential.
Absolutely. It's about creating this ripple effect where positive changes in one area lead to positive changes in other areas. And when a school is successful, it becomes something the community is proud of, which can lead to more support and investment.
Okay, so let's bring this back to our listeners. What can they do with all this information?
I think it's a chance to start a conversation about how data is being used in their local schools. Are schools using this Moneyball approach? Are they making decisions based on evidence? Or are they just doing things the way they've always been done? These are questions worth asking.
Yeah, and it's not about being a data expert yourself. It's about being informed and advocating for your child's education. Ask questions. Get involved. And remember, this isn't just about numbers. It's about creating a better future for our students.
Absolutely. It's about using data to help educators, get communities involved, and make sure every student has the opportunity to succeed.
I feel like we've barely scratched the surface here.
Yeah, there's so much more to uncover.
We talked about the what and the why of Moneyball for schools, but what about the how? Where do schools even begin with this kind of shift?
Well, that's where Dr. Knoff's blog is really helpful. He says it's not about reinventing the wheel. It's about using the data we already have, but in a smarter way. He gives this whole framework for doing a needs assessment. That's more than just checking off boxes.
Yeah, we touched on this a little bit.
Yeah.
But can we break that down even more? What are the steps in a Moneyball needs assessment?
Okay, so he starts with the importance of historical context. It's not enough to just look at this year's data. You have to look back at trends over the past few years to see how things have been changing and what factors might be contributing to current challenges or successes.
So it's about looking at the bigger picture, not just a snapshot in time.
Exactly. Then he says to do a SWOT analysis, which we talked about earlier. This helps schools figure out their strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. It's like a 360-degree view of the school's environment.
And that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because you can't really fix problems if you don't understand what's causing them.
Right. And then there's the resource audit. This means looking at all the resources the school has, both inside the school and in the community. You need to know what you have before you start making plans.
That's like checking your pantry before you go to the grocery store.
Yeah.
You don't want to buy stuff you already have.
Yeah.
Plus, you might find something you forgot about.
Yeah. And finally, Dr. Knoff talks about the gap analysis and the action plan. This is where you connect the dots between the needs you found and the resources you have. It's like a roadmap to reach the school's goals.
So it's not just about collecting data. It's about using it to make decisions.
Yeah.
And actually improve things. It's about turning data into action.
Exactly. And Dr. Knoff says this is especially important for dealing with the mental health crisis in schools. He says a lot of schools have resources, but they might not be using them the right way.
Like that example in his blog
Yeah.
about the district with all the counselors and social workers, but they were still struggling to meet the needs of their students.
Right. That happens a lot, and it shows why schools need to be smarter about mental health support if they use data. To understand the mental health challenges students are facing, they can target their support better.
So instead of just reacting to problems, schools can be proactive.
Exactly.
And remember, this isn't just about students doing better in school, although that's obviously important. Dr. Knoff says this approach could save schools money too.
Yeah, we talked about that, but it's worth repeating. If you're putting money into programs that work, you'll see a better return on your investment.
Right.
It's about using your resources wisely, and then you can take those savings and put them back into the school to make things even better.
Okay. We've talked about a lot today, but before we go, I want to leave everyone with a question. Imagine your school had unlimited resources. To analyze data, what's the one question you'd want answered to help students succeed?
Wow. That's a great question. Really makes you think about the real reasons why students struggle and how we can find new solutions.
I want everyone to think about that. What's hidden in your school's data? What could we do if we really use data to make things better?
It's an exciting thought, and it reminds us that we all have a part to play in making education better.
And don't forget to check out the show notes for links to Dr. Knopf's blog and other resources. We'll also include that Moneyball clip we mentioned.
It's inspiring. Even with limited resources, you can make a huge difference if you're creative and strategic.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into Moneyball for schools. We hope you learned something new and feel inspired to ask questions and advocate for using data to make decisions in your own communities. Until next time.